In a successful mock accreditation exercise in Benin, Edo State, INEC Chairman Professor Yakubu Mahmood has expressed confidence in the Commission's preparedness for a free, fair and credible governorship election. During his on-site assessment of 3 local government areas, Professor Mahmood assured Edo voters, saying, quote, "The power to choose the next governor lies solely with you. Come out. Vote for your preferred party and candidate," end quote. Mr. Mahmood also reiterated INEC's commitment to protecting the integrity of the electoral process and upholding the people's choice. Joining us to discuss INEC's readiness and election prospect is Comrade Olufemi Lawson, who is the Senior Special Assistant on Public Enlightenment to the Ondo State Governor. Congratulations and good morning.
Thank you, good morning. Thank you for having me here.
Now, is this move by INEC enough to allay the concerns that have been raised by a section of the people of the state, talking about the resident electoral commissioner and all of the attendant drama around that? Yes. I do not want to delve into it, but INEC okaying this process and saying we are ready, but there are those who are still insisting, no, it is not enough. From your perspective, is this enough?
No, INEC is the umpire in this process, but like we've often said, I haven't been involved in elections in Nigeria a number of times, and we've come to realize that no matter the amount of preparedness on the part of INEC, if other stakeholders within the electoral chain refuse to play their role, we may not have the kind of credible election that we want as a people. In every election, you have the INEC being the umpire, you have the security agencies, the police and other paramilitary organizations coming to support the work of the police. You have the voters themselves, you have the election monitors and observers, then you have the politicians who are holding a very big stake in the process. So irrespective of how well INEC is prepared, if other stakeholders within the chain are not also showing same level of commitment, that is when we have all those kind of issues that are being raised around these elections now, and that may also be raised after this election in Edo State.
I'm talking about this recent happenings that we've been seeing, preparedness. I want to know the implications of a political party not signing the peace, a peace accord. That has always been an attendant feature of elections, on or off cycle, and now we are seeing a key party, one of the front runners, opting out for concern. I'm sure you followed that news.
It's an issue of serious concern. If you look at INEC's preparation, about 13 stages it's planned to undertake while announcing this election last year, it has gone through at least about 11 or thereabout, remaining just the election and the final stage of this process. And even though it is not statutory, or it's not binding by law for political parties or candidates to sign a peace accord, this was an initiative of some elder statesmen in Nigeria who think we need to engage politicians. And you see, this peace accord is often done to bring politicians to the table to make commitment to a peaceful electoral process. It is not usually something that is done to bring INEC or even the security agencies, in some cases, to the table. It is these same politicians that are brought to the table to make commitment to peace. So it is worrisome when a major political party participating in an election is not conceding to such a process. It should be a thing of serious concern, especially when that is even coming from a serving governor, even though he has raised issues around the fact that his party is feeling dissatisfied by the approach of the police towards addressing the concerns that have been raised around the election. But I think as the Chief Security Officer of the state, the governor of Edo State should have made a commitment to peace, irrespective of the provocation that he may be experiencing from his opponent in this election.
Now, how, from your perspective, because I need us to situate things with regards to the decision of such a party refusing to assent or commit to a peace accord, and then also raising concerns about the resident electoral commissioner and also security issues. Right. How do you see that shaping the election positively, negatively, the implication, basically?
The integrity of the election is very important, and that is the only way we can call it a free and fair election. Fair will not be the best in all ranking, but we must also understand that the concerns of political parties in election will always arise, just like we have experienced in the past. The election in Edo State is not going to be conducted by the resident electoral commissioner. It's just the representative of INEC in Edo State. There will be a returning officer that will be appointed by INEC. Other commissioners of INEC have been deployed to Edo State to monitor these elections, across the local governments in the state. He may have little role to play in the whole of this, except for being the host commissioner who may be responsible. But in the area of deployment of logistic, election materials, election security, and some other things that have to do with this election, he will have little role. I haven't observed the election and haven't been part of these off-season elections. You come to realize that you have little or no role to play in the election, even though the concerns of the political parties may be valid on the basis of his pronounced relationship with a major political figure
at the FCT.
At the FCT, the Minister of FCT.
So how do you think INEC can manage this? Because its integrity is at stake at the end of the day. Because what people will call out is, INEC, you didn't do this when we were calling you out or when we were telling you that this is our concern. How do you think INEC can manage all of these concerns such that its integrity is still intact?
INEC should do enough, in my view, to ensure that its impartiality is demonstrated not only by mere statement, but by actions. One of such actions I would have expected from INEC is to ask the REC in Edo to stay out of involvement in this election. It's just a day or two process. And INEC has enough human and logistic capacity and resources to conduct this election. It's just a state election. So I don't think it will be too much for INEC to clearly speak out and ask, if this is going to be one thing that will tarnish the integrity of this election, ask the REC to stay out of the conduct of this election while he resumes his duty after the election.
All right. And okay, perhaps we'll come back to that, but let's also still on the issue of security. How much security presence is needed for Saturday's election? We've been having issues of under-policing, over-policing during elections. But what would you rather see?
With the reports from Edo State, from groups observing election, who are already on the ground, engaging INEC and stakeholders, it is security will be a major issue in this election, going by the threats, of violence by politicians and some of their supporters in the build-up to this election. We've seen how campaign platforms have been turned to platform of abuses and all sort of things that can instigate violence during the election. So security will be a major issue. But I think the police should have enough capacity without necessarily bringing in the military to ensure that this election is conducted peacefully with the support of other paramilitary organizations and ensure that its men and officers are seen to be impartial. They have no role other than policing the vicinity of elections. The police and other security agencies must not be seen to be directly involved in balloting activities or be seen to be aligning with politicians irrespective of where they are coming from or their political party. It must support INEC's approach of impartiality to ensure that the people are secured, they are allowed to vote without intimidation and harassment, and that's a major responsibility I think the security agencies have, and it must deploy it as much as possible and to ensure that this is achievable.
Wouldn't that be, because one will wonder what is as much as possible. The people will come out to say that this process is being militarized or there's too much security presence and so they cannot come out to exercise their franchise at the end of the day. But confidence has to be reposed one way or the other such that the people trust that they are safe, secured, and that their votes count at the end of the day. You have mentioned those in the chain that can ensure that these people are secured and the process is seamless. But now the commitment, the people themselves who are the electorate, what can be done, to encourage them? They have seen all the drama play out. They are hearing different sides to this information, but then the decision still lies with them to say, this is my candidate. What would you say to an average person who will go out to the polls come Saturday to say, this is what should be done and they shouldn't be afraid?
To start with, what we often describe as intimidation by security agents during elections in the past is not usually in the number of men that are deployed for these elections, but the show of force. The attempts to demonstrate, that we have tanks, that we are coming with guns, oftentimes has been responsible for when people feel intimidated. But if people feel intimidated when they have 2 men holding a rifle than when they have 10 men holding baton on their hand. So the militarization of election is not going to be on the basis of the number of people or security personnel that are going to be deployed. Like I said, they have no business other than securing voting environment. But for the average voter willing to vote in that election, they must understand how important it is to the extent that the next 4 years of their life may likely depend on what the outcome of that election is. So I don't think that is not enough for them to defy any form of intimidation, or harassment that may be anticipated. What is most important is that this is about our destiny. We must go out and vote. And more than INEC, the security agencies have a duty to play in assuring the people that they are safe and they will be protected during these elections.
Okay, we'll still come back to this matter of securities because you have talked about those holding weapons and those holding batons. When you look at the level of campaign violence, what would you suggest these security officials wield? And because they too need to be safe. But we need to quickly go on a break. When we return, we'll continue this conversation. Stay with us.
Is this the new one?
Yes, ma. And each portion contains 5 grams of protein, 2.66 milligrams of iron, 414 IU, ma, of vitamin A. Copy that. Yeah, come up,
Move.
Mommy, is that what I think it is, Mommy?
Yes, it is, baby. You are the engine of your family. They win because of you. To win every day with the goodness of Golden Morn. Golden Morn, make every day golden. From Nestle.
Thank you for staying with us. We still have our guest in the studio, Comrade Olufemi Lawson, speaking with us on developments coming out of Edo State with regards to the coming governorship election. And before we went to the break, we're talking about security matters and how it is that these policemen, because you were saying that most people will be comfortable with security officials wielding batons as against weapons. And I am asking, these security personnel are also humans. They have families. They need to be safe as well. So what would you rather suggest as it is? Because if people are coming to attack them, how do they defend themselves? What should be done ideally?
It's about, your presence at election polling stations. That was my point of reference. Mm-hmm. The security operatives definitely are statutorily empowered to bear arms, which they would definitely do. But that must be within certain perimeters that allow people to freely vote, to express themselves without being necessarily surrounded by gun-wielding security officials. But they must also play their duty by ensuring that the citizens are secured. But not like the law does not even permit that you come to polling booths and you are bearing arms, and sometimes you are unable to differentiate between who is on duty or not at that point. So they have a duty to protect the people using every legitimate means, but at least we should allow the sanctity of the election around the polling stations and not...
I guess why I asked the question
of people
was, I think the last election or so, there were videos making the rounds of some police people when things were going on within the polling booth, they saw that the policemen did not intervene. And so some persons were asking questions. Why didn't they intervene? Why were they not with their weapons? And some other issues, came up at the end of the day. These same Nigerians were the one asking questions. And I'm wondering, how do we strike a balance? That was the essence of me asking that question.
But, of course, you're a key election observer, and you've been consistent over the years. But with eyes on Edo now, what have been the observations of elections of this nature in Edo State, and how is it determining how our observers, using that to work this time around?
Yes, like I said, a lot of groups, locally and internationally, already in Edo State, they've been involved in some of the pre-election activities. And in 2020, we were in Edo State, as one of the observers group in that election. And I think if what happened can be repeated this time around, it will make the job not only easier for election observers and monitors, but for INEC. What INEC did in Edo was that there were little or no room for distortion of the outcome of the election, because election results were immediately transmitted from the polling unit. And INEC has also promised the same this time around, that it's not only going to use beavers, but it's also going to ensure that IREV is deployed to the extent that real time, by the time we were about 3 p.m. on that election day, there were results from over 60% of polling units across the state. Very amazing. So we are hoping that that also has the tendency to reduce tension when people know that real time the results of the elections are being deployed, and you could see from the comfort of your home. So for observers, they've been engaging not only INEC, but even political parties and other stakeholders. Advocating peace is very important in this election, judging by what we've seen over the days, and most importantly also encouraging citizens to participate in this election as much as possible, give some level of credibility, and to the outcome of whatever
and trust, because I think there's also the issue of how much trust, or should people, would you be advocating that people should trust INEC? Because of course that trust deficits, the level of trust accorded to INEC from previous elections, INEC is also going to be, in the eye of the storm, so to speak. So what would be your advice to the electorate?
INEC is being closely monitored, not only by the observers or monitors who are monitoring this election, but by the people. It is INEC that will present itself as a trustworthy institution. And that is the only way you can win the confidence of the people. And that must be done in the remaining processes leading to this election. In the deployment of materials, it must be seen to be transparent. Deployment of its officials must be seen to be transparent. Even before the actual voting starts on Saturday, if you are able to achieve this, you are already building the trust between the commission and the people, and people will look forward to an election whose result will be acceptable to them at the end of the day.
Okay, so let's even dive deeper. When you're talking about transparency, what would that be? You said in the deployment of materials. What more transparency should INEC bring to the table for people to trust them? And in every other area, logistics, what more? Because one thing we know with INEC is that they communicate whenever they are having some challenges. We see them communicating as quickly as possible. We saw an improvement with that in the last election. So when you're saying transparency, perhaps bring it down to the specifics.
Well, specifically, when you say transparency, it's not just about letting people see that you're deploying material. Time is also part of the issue of transparency in elections, because when people are expected to start voting at a particular time, and election materials have not arrived, and at some point, election starts late in some places than it has been in some other places. These are issues that can affect the credibility of the election. So beyond ensuring that there's a transparent process of deploying materials, INEC must be conscious that it is timely done, and its personnel are seen in every position they are going to be participating in this election as being unbiased.
Right. 2.62 million registered voters are on record, and up until last week, there was the continuous, collection of PVCs. I wonder how that, seems to you in terms of voter turnout, voter awareness ahead of this election next week and this weekend.
Do you see an improvement from 2020?
Yeah, I hope there should be, because when you look at over 100,000 people registering to participate in this election added to existing figures. You understand that maybe a new generation of aspiring voters have already emerged in the state, and one is expecting that this election, because it's a major transition, we have had a governor that have served so that may be enough, to increase the interest of the people in participating in this election than the previous one.
And from the engagement of your people on the ground with the electorate, how politically aware are the people, and what is their mindset towards whoever takes over government? What are their demands?
Basically, if you look at the scenario in Edo, Edo State is a politically conscious state. From history, you understand that the people are always aware, especially when it has to do with politics and governance. They have a population of people who are very enlightened about governance. And majorly, their expectations, and there are some issues that are going to also define this election in Edo State, which has to do with the zoning of the governorship seats. Coincidentally, the two major political parties have gone to one of the zones that have been agitating for this seat to pick their candidate. It's one of the major factors that would determine the direction of this election. But for the people, the expectations are very high, because it's very unfortunate that today we still talk about we're going to build roads, we're going to give you water. I think we should be advancing in our electoral promises to our people. By now, we should have built enough roads. We should have had enough potable water for our people to drink. So I think other issues, particularly how you can transform the economy of the state, how you can transform the life of the people and make them more empowered, should begin to determine, how people vote in future elections.
Right, and I think the general elections of 2023 also sprang up a lot of surprises before the two-horse race, but now, then we saw, last year we saw, it between the three parties, and it appears that's what we will see. From the eye of an election observer, how does it affect you? In terms of, how you're going to do your work, how are you seeing the level of interest now that, another party has entered into the race, what used to be a two major party race, but now we are seeing three parties. How is that, of interest, so to speak, for election observers in terms of your work on election day and even beyond?
It's a good thing that 2023 has opened that window. Now we are beginning to see a democracy where the choices of our people are not narrowed to two major political parties. Today in the National Assembly, we have members of more than 5 political parties that are in the National Assembly today. It used to be the two major political parties in the past. Even in some state assembly today, we have people from even some of these smaller political parties that we used to call them. In fact, they are now occupy a governorship seat, the Labour Party. So it is widening the chances of our people, the choices of our people, and it's one of the things that may also determine the outcome of this election, because when people have to choose between two major candidates, sometimes the votes are likely going to be divided into two. But with the entrance of another political party, which is not just a minor political party now, Labour Party into the race, you can agree that there's tendency that whatever will happen will be determined by the participation of these three major political parties. Whatever the outcome will be determined by the votes that any of these three parties will secure in the election.
Interesting. Now, because you mentioned something earlier, I want to take you back to that statement talking about politicians we should have built more roads by now because of the campaign promises they make. Now, I want to flip it the other way. The power of the people. Do they really understand that they can hold people to account for the promises they made? Have they expressed that?
A lot of our people are not aware, and that is one of the reasons for the governor of Ondo State to have created that office for public enlightenment. Is a product of this kind of discussion. Our people are not really aware enough, and you cannot just put it on the doorstep of INEC. A lot of times, because INEC is the umpire in this election. Do you know that majorly one of the responsibilities of political parties is citizens' education, voters' education. And it is through voters' education, citizens' enlightenment, that you can understand your power as a citizen, that you have even more power than those you have elected, that you hold the key to the government house, as the case may be. But deliberately in the past, our people have not been educated enough to understand their power, to understand that they can actually determine their own future, through elections. So political parties are not doing enough at all. in the past. I do hope that as we move ahead in future, political parties will take it up as a responsibility to enlighten citizens, to educate citizens about their power in the whole process that is called democracy.
And we are seeing people, the narrative out there is that people are even also asking, what's in it for me, even during this campaign season. And of course, you know about the challenges, socioeconomic challenges in Nigeria as it is. How much is that likely to be a factor, during this election?
It is still the problem of lack of education, because your stake, in fact, the biggest stake you have, or the biggest interest you should have, is who governs you. That, I'm poor today, I can't feed, I can't go, I don't know. They are all product of leadership. You are most likely going to be affected by whatever policy your state is embarking upon than that one meal or two that you are not eating a day.
But in terms of, pecuniary, voting along pecuniary lines, stomach infrastructure, as it's being called, are you seeing that? And how is it going to, go on?
It is yet to be eradicated in our elections, even though there have been campaigns, there have been advocacy in the media against it. You've done
Would
a lot
we be able to
in
do
this
that?
regard. But I think when we educate our people enough, they will understand that the destiny of 4 years is more than 5,000 naira, 3,000 naira that any politicians can give you to vote. So it is part of that duty that we have to educate our citizens, and the political parties have a role to take. Though they have benefited a lot in the past from this lack of education of the power of the citizens in our electoral process.
And you think they'll change that now?
Now we must begin. Of course, that's why the media has been doing a lot. I gave that to the TVC also. We must do more as citizens to commit our political parties into embarking on that statutory role of voters' education and citizens' enlightenment.
Interesting. We can only hope for the best for the Edo Governorship election come Saturday, that it is free, fair, credible, and incidents-free at the end of the day. That's what most Nigerians are looking forward to. But we must thank you, Comrade Olufemi Lawson, Senior Special Assistant on Public Enlightenment to the Ondo State Governor, for your time on the program.